Welcome everyone to Mail Fuzz TV. I am Peter, and today I'm going to be talking about Guillermo del Toro's Cabinet of Curiosities, episode 1. It's called Lot 36. It's kind of a weird case because normally I'll start spoiler free, and I will a little bit, but this is an anthology show. It's not a serialized series. This is the new Netflix show. Del Toro kind of acts as the host. He's curated these episodes, which are basically short horror movies, which they're releasing kind of in an interesting way. They're not doing like the 1 day thing. I think they're doing 2 a day over 4 days for 8 full episodes. So obviously it's perfect for Halloween season, and this ranked high in the pilot vote, which is why I'm sneaking this one in. So the first episode was Lot 36, which is what I'm going to talk about today, which stars Tim Blake Nelson, who you probably have seen in some things over time. Sebastian Roche is also in there, who's another face I recognize. But what's interesting here is obviously I'm going to talk about this premise of this first episode, but it is completely an anthology, so this does not stand for any of the other episodes after this, but it's probably a good taste of the type of stories that this show is going to have, and I don't know if they're planning on doing more of these or if this is just a one-time thing. I imagine if it's a hit, and it could be because we're in Halloween season, it's the perfect time to release something like this. This first episode I think was like 45 minutes long. So the premise of this first one is that Lot 36 is a storage locker place, and they auction off these storage lockers that are full of stuff after the person who owns it dies, or for other reasons they might have abandoned it. So they auction it off. It seems slightly sketchy, but it seems to be a thing that they do. And Tim Blake Nelson is this character who bids on them and then tries to, hawk stuff after. He tries to make money off whatever he finds. He owes some bad people money. That's kind of like there. The big thing with the episode, though, is that he's a very prejudiced character. We see him listening to very kind of right-wing, like, audio, either podcasts or radio shows in his car. He's making little comments at minorities whenever he gets a chance. He refers to it as being his country, and he's just kind of generally a piece of shit to people. He's not a very nice character, but that's very clearly what they're setting up with them right at the start. So you expect that, in maybe kind of a classic Tales from the Crypt-esque way, he's probably going to get comeuppance for who he is by the end, and there's an element of that in there for sure. The backstory of who owns the lot also kind of ties into his views, and that it's like a more extreme version, and kind of thematically brings some of it full circle. But before I spoil anything, I'll give you a warning before I go into any more plot details. Just did I like it? Was it any good? And honestly, as an anthology episode of a TV show, I actually thought it was fairly strong. It's not the best thing in the world, but it's got a decent enough slow build and kind of mystery of what the lot is, and the idea that there's maybe some items in there that are linking to supernaturally stuff or whatever. That build is fairly strong. It does a good job of defining the character very early on. I think there's some decent build in the direction. The director of this episode is Guillermo Navarro, who I don't think I know from anything in particular. I mean, I assume a lot of these directors are going to be up and coming like horror filmmakers and stuff like that. I mean, this guy actually was a cinematographer on a lot of Del Toro's movies. Now that I'm just glancing at his IMDb page, so this is maybe him getting a chance to show off some of his directing skills. He's done a lot of TV episodes by looking at his IMDb here, but so this is maybe a nice platform for some of these directors to like show off their skills a little bit, maybe catapult their careers. I thought the direction was pretty solid, though. I think my favorite thing about it is that it doesn't like whiff the payoff. I think when it finally builds up to like a reveal of some kind, it goes all out with it, and I don't want to say, I don't want to allude to what it actually is, but there is a satisfying visual payoff to all the build of like what's going on and what's this all leading to. Which I appreciated, and part of that I think is just that we're making this show in 2022 versus when Tales from the Crypt was made, and we have access to maybe more outlandish effects and things like that to pull off some other wacky stuff. The downside to that is though is you're not doing as many practical effects, and maybe we're going to have CG that's subpar at times. But in this first episode, I kind of appreciated what it built up to. So I generally had a good time with this, and I'm always weird with anthologies because it's like when I'm in the mood for another short story, tends to be I've got so many movies that I'm trying to get to that I'll usually pick a movie over another anthology episode, but that's just kind of a me thing, as opposed to, I go to movies for standalone great stories, I go to TV for, serialization, or at the very least, like, recurring characters that go on different adventures. Anthology shows for me, well, I like some of them. I've only ever successfully kind of got through them when I've been reviewing them because I've had a reason to keep going. I have a weird time kind of sticking to them for whatever reason. But I had a reasonably fun time with this. It's got a really strong tone right from the get-go. There's kind of just a kind of a sinister undertone to things. We're introduced to the old man who owns the lot, who passes away. And that's not a spoiler, that's just the setup of the episode. He dies, which is why this lot is up for grabs. So there's like a sizzle reel at the end of the episode teasing the other 7 stories, which I don't think I've seen before on Netflix, but I guess in this case, because it's like all individual stories, they can kind of do that and sort of promote them all at the one time. Yeah, so I would recommend checking it out if you want a nice little horror story, and possibly 8 horror stories to like sort of watch around your movie watching over the Halloween season. It seems like a perfect fit. It's obviously why they did this. So as far as like getting into more spoilery stuff goes, I would say, warning here, I'm going to talk about some plot stuff and some spoilery stuff. There's some things that pay off here. I mentioned the comeuppance for how he treats people. The big thing, other than just little comments he makes and like general kind of dodgy sentiments that he has, early on there's this Latina woman who like comes to the storage place and is like, hey, like, I need my locker back. And it turns out that they've auctioned off all of her belongings because she had moved and wasn't contactable, and there was basically a misunderstanding, and she wants her stuff back. And she's not even angry, but she has like family photographs and things like that, stuff that's not valuable to anyone else, but it's just stuff that she wants back. And it turns out that our main character, played by Nelson, was the one who got her lot. So the guy who runs this place is like, hey, he's the one who got your stuff. If you're lucky, you might still have some of it, and he can maybe help you out. And she goes to him, and Nelson is just like, nope, legally, everything in there is mine. I got it, fair and square. Tough shit. I'm not letting you anywhere near anything. And it's particularly a dick move, because she's not even trying to get any valuables back that would actually be stuff that he would sell. It's just papers and documents and photographs, stuff that's unique to her family that is literally of no value to anyone, including him. And he's an asshole about it, and the only thing he gives her is the padlock that used to be on her lot, which does come back into play later. And sure enough, later on, when the monster is chasing after him and he's trying to get out, she chooses to lock him in rather than help him out, because he had like an easy way to help her here. All he had to do was not be a shithead. This is not a big inconvenience to just go and open the locker and let her rummage about and see if any of her stuff's in there. So he definitely gets his comeuppance, and this is kind of the really specific point where he does something shitty. And he's just constantly looking out for himself. He's constantly trying to just fight, because the actual stuff he finds some valuable stuff, and he takes it to an appraiser who gets in contact with a German or Austrian guy who's played by Sebastian Roche, who is like, hey, this like witchboard that you found and these like books that are like hidden inside that are really valuable, they're really rare, they're all about the occult and stuff. So that kind of like gets you into the like where the story's going and that kind of stuff. But there's a 4th book that's not in the secret compartment, and they're like, hey, if you get the 4th book, that's worth even more. Like I'll pay you 300 grand for this complete set if we get this last book. So he's Tim Blake Nelson's character is just constantly like looking for stuff, and he's constantly worried that people are going to screw him over. When they go back to the lot and they're looking for this book in the lot, he has to go away for a minute. He's like, hey, if you take anything, I'll know. And like he's constantly paranoid. He's out for himself. It's every person for himself. He has no seemingly any empathy or or kinship with anyone around him. He is a complete loner piece of shit. And this is partly what all comes to bite him in the end. The big stuff though is they find a secret compartment, which is actually a secret compartment in the lot, which leads to another room, which was fairly obvious was going to happen because early on there's a line where, oh, the lot I got smaller than these other ones that are next to it, and it's just kind of like, oh yeah, because there's probably a secret part of the back that's been walled up or something. But it turns out this old Nazi, this old guy, turns out he was a Nazi, and he was doing occult stuff, and he was trying to raise some sort of a demon or whatever. And honestly, like when this thing shows up towards the end of the episode, I was really into it because it really was very Cthulhu-esque. There's a lot of tentacles for a head, and it kind of swallows up the other guy and kills him. So there's a little bit of Tim Blake Nelson running around a lot. It kind of is the climax of the episode. And then, the older woman locks him in because he's getting comeuppance for not helping her, and he gets his head consumed. And it felt very, as much as it was purely played as supernatural and like demonic or whatever, it felt like cosmic horror when you actually see this thing. It felt like something out of a Lovecraftian tale. And that's kind of like, I enjoyed the build up to it. I thought it was a strong character study of this asshole. But when we actually got to see the monster, I was like, okay, you know what? You paid this off. You paid this off with a great horror visual. Because it was kind of a slow burn up until that point, and not in a bad way. But I think the monster really worked for me to kind of just put the punctuation on the episode and stuff. Like, okay, I got a satisfying little horror meal out of that. And very Tales from the Crypt, actually. The more I've thought about it, the more I can see the comparisons to it, because we have this asshole who not only is just generally kind of a scumbag, but then he specifically chooses not to be nice to someone, and that comes back to bite him in the end. And even just the idea that because I thought maybe he would learn a lesson during the episode early on when he first finds the photographs of the old guy, like his old Nazi stuff. I thought, oh, look, I can see what maybe they're going to do with this. Perhaps they're going to have him learn a lesson, because this is like the extreme version of what he's kind of tapping into with his attitude. And he never actually does. He's just as greedy and selfish and out for himself the entire episode. It kind of challenges him at various points, because we see him listening to this radio show talking about how he feels victimized as a white person because he can't talk about certain things. And then he goes to this auction, and the guy who runs the storage place is black, and immediately like, oh, is there some tension here because of how he feels? And there's a couple of little comments here or there, and the guy who runs the place is like trying his best to be nice like all the time, and is like telling him to lighten up and telling him to try and get over whatever shit he's got, because it sounds like he always brings up Tim Blake Nelson's character was as a vet, and he's always bringing up that he fought for the country, and that makes it his country and stuff like that. And like every argument turns into that same talking point. And this is pointed out to us by the guy who runs this place. I think his name's Eddie. And I think all of this stuff early on really painted a picture of who our main character is. So he's not likable, of course, but you don't necessarily have to have a likable main character in a horror story. If anything, you can have a character who you're kind of looking forward to getting their comeuppance and getting torn to parts or just eviscerated, like this guy ends up being. It's funny because I thought they might reveal something with the other guy, because Sebastian Roche's character, the German or Austrian who comes in to like buy the stuff, like he does talk about this guy being a Nazi, and he's like, yeah, he's this awful person and all the rest of it. But part of me was like wondering if they were going to go down the route where they reveal that he's like into this shit in a way that's unhealthy and he wants to raise the stuff. But it does seem like every time they encounter something, he's like saying, no, don't touch that, no, don't do the next part, like we don't want to actually raise the demon. He's interested in the material and collecting it, but he doesn't actually want to unleash hell upon Earth. So it's be careful what you wish for. I guess maybe to put the moral of the story another way, he wants to play victim throughout the episode, and then at the end he gets what he's been saying. He is the victim at the end, a victim of his own doing. So. Yeah, so it's a solid little story, to be honest. I think I had a good bit of fun with it for what it was. It's not going to change your life. It's not like an earth-shatteringly amazing story, but I think it's a decent little short horror story, and if the rest of the episodes are kind of on par with this, or possibly even a bit better, then I imagine this is a good little horror anthology to dig through. It's the sort of thing where it also feels like it could be a segment in a movie. You know how you get horror anthologies where you get 3 or 4 stories? This could easily be in like a 2-hour horror anthology where there's 3 stories. And you could argue that this is, you know, instead of an 8-episode season, this could be like 3 movies that are just kind of divvied up with, you know, 3 stories each, give or take. So, yeah, I recommend checking out. That's Guillermo del Toro's Cabinet of Curiosities. Not a bad time, certainly, based on the first episode. I don't regret watching it. Admittedly, you know, it's hard to keep these things feeling fresh and original. It's entirely possible as you watch more of the episodes, it might feel like, oh, we're just getting derivative takes on other horror tropes. And some of this was a bit predictable, but I think the payoff of the monster really just cinched it for me that I was having a good time. And Tim Blake Nelson's a pretty decent character actor, so he's kind of getting to flex here by playing a scumbag, which is kind of nice. So, yeah, that's the first episode. That's lot 36 of Cabinet of Curiosities. So, by all means, if you've watched more of these, because I think 6 of them are out now by the time I record this, so they 8. Let me know in the comments how they fared. Is this one of the stronger episodes? Is this one of the weaker episodes? That kind of thing. By all means, let me know. Not just for me, but for anyone else who's like stumbling into the comments and wants a bigger range of opinions. But yeah, let me know what you thought in the comments. Like, subscribe, ding the bell for notifications. All that stuff helps out a lot. Of course, you can head over to patreon.com/MailFuzzTV and support all the content over there, as you can with a one-time super thanks button below the video. All that stuff does help. Thank you very much for joining me. I always appreciate it. Keep watching TV. Have you got any vanilla?